There's this quiet truth about communication that most people overlook. Trust doesn't grow because you said the right thing. It grows because you showed up the right way. People don't connect to perfection. They connect to presence. Because when you're present, you're saying without words, "You matter enough for me to give you my full attention right now." Think about the last time you were talking to someone and they looked down at their phone. They nodded, they said, "Huh," but you knew they weren't really there. That tiny moment does something to you. It makes you close up a little. It tells your mind, what I'm saying doesn't matter. And the next time you share a little less. That's how trust erodes. Not through betrayal, but through distraction. Now flip that moment. Imagine someone stops what they're doing, turns toward you, and locks in. Their eyes aren't wandering, their body isn't fidgeting, their phone is nowhere in sight. They're quiet, they're still, and they're fully in that moment with you. That single gesture, that stillness, can rebuild more trust than 1,000 promises. Presence is power, but it's rare, because everyone today is chasing perfection. We polish our words, we rehearse our stories, we filter our emotions until they sound smooth and professional. But real trust doesn't live in polish. It lives in imperfection. It lives in the pauses, the stumbles, the eye contact that says, "I'm really here, trying to understand you." When you're present, you stop performing. You stop trying to sound wise, clever, or confident. You start listening, and that shift changes everything. It changes the tone of your voice. It changes how people receive you. Because when someone feels your full attention, they automatically feel safe. Their body relaxes. Their guard drops. You're no longer just a person talking. You become a space they can trust. Here's what most people don't realize: a presence isn't about silence, it's about energy. You can be silent and still be distracted. You can nod and still be far away in your mind. But when your energy says, "I'm here with you," that's when presence happens. It's an invisible language, but everyone feels it. In every conversation, you're sending two messages. The first is your words, the second is your presence. And people believe the second one more. If your words say, "I care," but your attention says, "I'm bored," people will believe your attention. That's why being present is more trustworthy than being perfect, because presence never lies. The challenge is, presence takes effort. It's uncomfortable. You'll notice your mind trying to drift away, trying to fix, trying to judge. But if you can learn to hold space, to sit in someone's story without jumping in to solve it, you'll instantly become someone people open up to. And they won't even know why. They'll just feel that they can. Let's get real. Being present doesn't mean you agree with everything. It doesn't mean you have to fix anything. It means you're choosing to understand before you decide. You're giving people your attention, not your agenda. That's where most of us go wrong. We listen to reply. We listen to prepare our answer, our defense, our opinion. But when you're truly present, you listen to understand. You start noticing things you missed before: their tone, their hesitation, the emotion hiding under their words. And when you respond to that, not just what they said, people feel it. They think, "Wow, they really get me." Presence builds emotional safety, and emotional safety builds trust. When people feel seen, they don't need to protect themselves. They stop editing their thoughts. They stop wearing masks. They start being honest. And honesty is the soil where trust grows. Sometimes presence is as simple as pausing before you speak. It's the moment between hearing and reacting. Because in that pause, you show that you're actually processing what was said, not just waiting to talk. That tiny pause can change the temperature of an entire conversation. Presence also means noticing your environment. If you're in a conversation that matters, put the phone away. Turn your body toward the person. Eliminate distractions. Because every distraction says something else matters more than you right now. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be available. And maybe the most powerful part of presence is silence. Silence makes people feel heard in ways that words never can. When someone shares something emotional, resist the urge to fill the silence. Let it breathe. That quiet moment tells them, "I'm not rushing you. I'm not uncomfortable with your truth." That's presence in its purest form. Now, if you're someone who struggles to stay present, you're not broken. You're just human. Our brains are wired to jump ahead, to plan, to analyze, but you can train presence the same way you train focus. Every time you catch yourself drifting in a conversation, gently bring yourself back. Look at their face. Listen to their tone. Ask yourself, what are they really trying to say? That one question brings you back into the moment. Presence also requires self-awareness. You can't be present for others if you're disconnected from yourself. When you're anxious, overwhelmed, or trying to impress, your energy scatters. So before you walk into any important conversation, take a second to center yourself. Breathe. Remind yourself, my job right now isn't to fix, it's to connect. That mindset shift alone transforms your communication. Here's the truth, most people aren't used to being listened to without interruption. When you give them that gift, when you give them your time, your eye contact, your curiosity, it feels rare. It feels special. It builds a memory. They may not remember what you said, but they will remember how they felt when you were fully there. And that memory becomes the foundation of trust. So when you're tempted to say the perfect thing, to sound impressive, to defend your point, stop. Ask yourself, what does this moment really need? My performance or my presence? 99 times out of 100, it's presence. Because people don't want perfect words. They want real ones. They want to know that behind your eyes, someone is truly listening. That's how presence builds trust, not through technique, but through sincerity. Not through being flawless, but through being fully human. When you show up as you are, when you slow down enough to see and hear another person, you create something rare, a moment that feels safe, honest, and real. And that's where every great relationship, every honest team, every strong friendship begins. Most people think they're good listeners until someone really needs to be heard. Then suddenly, we turn into fixers, debaters, or storytellers. We jump in with advice. We cut people off mid-sentence. We share our own experience trying to relate. But here's the hard truth, none of that builds trust. Because people don't want to be solved, they want to be understood. Listening to understand means you stop listening to win. You stop preparing your next line while the other person is still talking. You stop trying to make their pain make sense to you. Instead, you slow down, you lean in. You let their words have weight before you rush to respond. Because when someone finally opens up, what they're really saying isn't fix me, it's see me. And you can't see someone if you're too busy looking for your turn to speak. We live in a world where everyone's fighting to be heard, but few are willing to listen. And that's exactly why genuine listening stands out. It's rare. It's powerful. It makes people feel something they didn't even know they were craving, to be understood without being judged. The problem is, most of us were never taught how to listen. We were taught how to argue, how to convince, how to respond, but not how to simply hold space for someone else's truth. And that's what listening to understand is. It's creating a space where another person's emotions can exist without interruption. When you listen to reply, your goal is to speak. When you listen to understand, your goal is to connect. That one shift can change every relationship you have, at work, in love, in friendship, even with yourself. Here's how it usually goes wrong. Someone says, I've had a rough day. And before they finish, we jump in with, you think that's bad, wait till you hear mine. Or we say, it'll be fine, don't worry. And we think we're helping. But what we've really done is skip the most important part, acknowledgement. People don't want quick comfort. They want validation. They want to know their feelings make sense. That's why phrases like, that sounds really hard, or I can see why you'd feel that way, are so powerful. Because they tell the other person, you don't have to defend your feelings here. Listening to understand isn't passive. It's not about sitting in silence and nodding, it's active. It's intentional. You're not just hearing words, you're reading emotion, you're paying attention to tone, to pauses, to what's not being said. Because often, the real message hides between the lines. And here's the thing, when people feel understood, they open up more, they drop their guard, they start telling you the truth because they feel safe. And that's where trust lives, not in agreement, but in understanding. You don't have to agree with everything someone says to make them feel heard. You just have to be curious. Ask questions like, can you tell me more about that? Or, what was that like for you? Those small questions say, I care more about your experience than my opinion. Listening like this is uncomfortable at first. Your ego will fight it. You'll feel the urge to jump in, to correct, to fix. But every time you resist that impulse, you strengthen your emotional control and your ability to connect deeply. Sometimes, the best thing you can say after someone shares is nothing at all. Just silence, just presence. Let their words settle. Let them breathe. Because silence gives people permission to keep going. And often, what they say after the silence is what they were truly trying to express. Listening to understand also means listening without assumptions. You can't assume you already know the ending to their story. You can't assume you know their motives or their feelings. Every assumption builds a wall between you and the truth. Real listening is humble. It says, I don't know your full story. Help me see it. Think about how often conversations go wrong because people are listening from defense, not curiosity. One person says something, the other person hears it as an attack, and now both are just trying to prove a point. That's not communication, that's combat. And in combat, trust dies. But when one person chooses to listen, really listen, everything softens. The energy shifts from argument to understanding. Listening to understand doesn't mean you let people talk forever or walk all over you. It means you listen long enough to get the emotion behind their words. Once they feel that you understand, they become more open to understanding you. When you listen like this, you'll notice something powerful happen. People start calming down. Their tone softens, their anger fades. Because when someone feels understood, they no longer have to yell to be heard. Most conflicts don't need solutions. They need understanding first. And the most trusted communicators know this. They know that in any tense moment, the person who listens first controls the tone. Not because they're weak, but because they're grounded. They're not reacting to words, they're responding to meaning. Listening to understand also requires patience. There will be pauses. There will be moments you don't know what to say. That's okay. Don't rush to fill the space. Let them take their time. Sometimes people speak slowly because they're trying to make sense of what they feel while saying it. And if you cut them off too soon, you rob them of that process. When you start practicing this kind of listening, you'll notice people start trusting you faster. They'll start telling you things they haven't told anyone else, not because you have the best advice, but because you gave them the rare gift of being fully heard. Listening to understand is not a skill you master once, it's a habit you build daily. It's choosing to pause your thoughts and give someone else's voice the stage. It's humility in action. It's empathy in practice. It's saying, your story matters enough for me to stop mine for a moment. Every person you meet is carrying something you don't know. Every conversation is a chance to understand rather than assume. And when you choose to listen deeply, you don't just hear their words, you hear their humanity. And that's what people remember long after the conversation ends. Trust isn't broken by lies alone, it's broken by overpromises that never become action. Every time you say something you don't mean, every time you make a promise you can't keep, you weaken your credibility, and once people stop believing your words, no amount of talking can rebuild that bridge. Because trust doesn't live in what you say, it lives in what you do after you say it. We live in a world where people talk big, they promise results, loyalty, effort, change, all with good intentions. But good intentions don't build trust. Consistency does, and that's where owning your words begins. It's not about being perfect, it's about being honest with your capacity, your limits, and your truth. When you say yes to everything, you think you're being kind, you think you're helping. But in reality, you're setting yourself up to disappoint. Because every yes you give when you don't mean it becomes another no. You'll have to explain later. And people remember the letdown far longer than they remember the promise. Owning your words means meaning what you say, even if it's uncomfortable. It's saying, I can't commit to that right now, instead of pretending you can. It's saying, I'll try my best, instead of, I guarantee it. Because nothing builds trust faster than someone whose words match their actions. And nothing destroys it faster than someone who talks beautifully but delivers nothing. There's a reason people trust quiet confidence more than loud assurance. The quiet ones understand that words carry weight. They don't throw them around lightly. They understand that trust is like a bank account. Every word you honor makes a deposit, and every word you break makes a withdrawal. When you overpromise, you go into emotional debt. The truth is, people don't expect you to do everything. They just expect you to do what you say. Even if it's small, even if it's simple. When you say, I'll call you tomorrow, and you actually do, you're telling that person, my word means something. And over time, that's what builds reliability. Because reliability is trust in motion. Most people overpromise not because they want to deceive, but because they're afraid to disappoint. They say yes out of pressure, guilt, or fear of rejection. But here's the irony in trying not to disappoint up front, you end up disappointing later. And that kind of disappointment hurts more because it feels like betrayal. Owning your words requires courage. It's easier to please people than to be honest with them. It's easier to say what they want to hear than what they need to hear. But trust isn't built in ease, it's built in truth. When you're straightforward, even if it's uncomfortable, people respect you. They may not like your answer, but they'll know where you stand. And that's what makes your communication dependable. There's also a subtle power in being specific with your words. Vague promises breed vague trust. If you say, I'll take care of it, but never clarify when or how, you leave room for doubt. But when you say, I'll send it by Thursday at noon, you set a clear expectation. And when you meet that expectation, you reinforce the belief that your words have structure, not just emotion. You don't need to promise big things to build trust. In fact, big promises often backfire. It's the small, consistent follow through that matters more. The text you said you'd send, the call you said you'd make, the apology you said you'd give. Trust grows through those quiet, ordinary moments of keeping your word. Owning your words also means taking responsibility when you fall short. Because mistakes happen, plans change. But when you acknowledge your slip instead of hiding from it, you regain integrity, saying, I told you I'd do it, but I didn't. And that's on me is one of the fastest ways to rebuild broken trust. Because people don't need perfection, they need accountability. When your words and actions don't align, people stop listening to your words altogether. You can apologize, explain, or justify, but if your pattern doesn't change, your credibility fades. That's why leaders, partners, and communicators who are trusted aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who follow through the most. And here's something important, your reputation is built on repetition. You can't fake reliability once or twice, it has to be a habit. If people know you as someone who delivers, you won't have to convince them to believe you next time. your track record will speak for you. But if you constantly overpromise, every new word you speak carries the weight of the last disappointment. Owning your words also means being mindful of emotional promises. We don't just break practical commitments, we break emotional ones, too. When you say, "You can always talk to me," and then you're too distracted to listen, that's a broken promise. When you say, "I'll be there for you," but vanish when things get hard, that's a broken promise. Words create emotional contracts, and when you break them, people lose not just trust, but safety. That's why awareness is everything. Before you speak, ask yourself, do I really mean this? Can I actually do this? If the answer is no, have the courage to say so. Because one honest no builds more trust than a dozen fake yeses. Owning your words is also about how you handle conflict. When you make a statement, stand by it, but also be open to adjusting it if you're wrong. People respect clarity, but they also respect humility. Saying, "Here's what I said before, but I've learned more now," shows growth, not weakness. It shows that your words evolve with your understanding, not your ego. The reason this matters so much is because communication without accountability is just noise. Anyone can speak beautifully, anyone can sound sincere, but when you consistently back your words with action, people stop doubting you. They start relying on you. And reliability is the purest form of respect. Owning your words doesn't mean you speak less, it means you speak deliberately. Every word you say becomes a small test of your integrity. And over time, those small tests add up. People begin to form a picture of who you are, not from what you say once, but from what you keep proving. When your communication becomes grounded in truth instead of convenience, people start to relax around you. They don't have to read between the lines. They don't have to second guess your intentions. They can simply take you at your word. And in a world where everyone's talking and few are delivering, that kind of clarity is rare. The most trustworthy communicators understand something simple. Words are promises, even when you don't label them that way. Every sentence you speak plants an expectation in someone's mind. And every action you take afterward either waters that seed or lets it die. Owning your words means choosing to be the kind of person whose speech builds rather than breaks. It's about creating alignment between what you say and what you do, so that over time, people stop wondering if they can trust you, because your consistency already answered the question. Statements, not you. Blame, there's a moment in every conversation where trust either grows or breaks, and it usually happens in the heat of emotion. When we feel hurt, misunderstood, or frustrated, our instinct is to defend ourselves. We raise our voice, we point fingers, and we say things like, "You never listen," or "You always do this." But here's the thing, every time you start a sentence with "you," the other person stops listening and starts protecting. Because "you" sounds like blame, it sounds like attack. And the moment someone feels attacked, they stop hearing your pain and start defending their pride. That's why learning to speak with statements isn't just good communication. It's emotional intelligence in action. It's the difference between creating distance or connection, between escalation or understanding. Because language owns your feelings, while language transfers them like a weapon. And people don't feel safe when they're being attacked, even if you're right. Think about the difference between "you don't care about me" and "I feel uncared for when we don't talk." One pushes away, the other invites in. One blames, the other reveals. You points fingers, I opens doors. And that subtle shift can turn an argument into a conversation. When you say, "I feel," you're not denying your emotion, you're directing it responsibly. You're saying, "This is my experience," not your accusation. And that makes it easier for the other person to stay engaged instead of defensive. It's a form of honesty that doesn't harm. Because communication isn't just about expressing truth, it's about expressing in a way that can be received. The truth is, blame is addictive. It gives us a quick release. It feels powerful in the moment to say, "You did this." But that power is fake. It's control disguised as clarity. Real clarity happens when you turn inward first, when you pause and ask, "What am I actually feeling right now?" Maybe you're not angry, maybe you're disappointed. Maybe you're not ignored, maybe you're scared you don't matter. When you know the real emotion, you can speak from honesty instead of reaction. Statements help you do that. They make you accountable for your side of the emotional equation. Instead of, "You made me angry," try, "I felt angry when that happened." The event may have triggered you, but the emotion belongs to you. And when you speak that way, you communicate maturity. You show that you're aware of your own feelings, and that awareness builds respect. The people who build the deepest trust aren't the ones who never get emotional. They're the ones who know how to express emotion without attacking. Because that's when communication stays alive. When you can say how you feel without turning it into blame, people stop bracing themselves around you. They relax. They lean in. They start hearing you again. Here's something powerful: when you use statements, you also give others permission to do the same. You model what healthy expression looks like. And slowly, conversations that once turned into battle start turning into bridges, because both people are taking ownership of their feelings instead of assigning responsibility for them. You might think, but if I say I feel, doesn't that make me sound weak? The answer is the opposite. Owning your emotion doesn't make you weak, it makes you credible. It shows emotional control, it shows that you can face discomfort without throwing it at someone else. And that earns more respect than any outburst ever could. It's also worth noticing that blame often comes from a place of hurt that hasn't been named. When you say, "You never listen," what you might really mean is, "I feel unheard and invisible." When you say, "You always make me feel stupid," what you might actually mean is, "I feel insecure when my ideas are dismissed." The deeper truth hides behind the accusation, and I statements pull that truth forward. Imagine how different your relationships would feel if, instead of trading blame, you traded understanding. If every time tension rose, you slowed down just enough to say, "Here's what I'm feeling," instead of, "Here's what you did wrong." That one habit can diffuse more conflict than any clever argument ever could. Because statements are grounded in vulnerability, not ego. And vulnerability creates connection. In workplaces, friendships, and families, this habit changes everything. A leader who says, "I felt frustrated when deadlines were missed because it impacts the team," opens a dialogue. A leader who says, "You're so irresponsible," shuts it down. A partner who says, "I feel distant lately," invites closeness. A partner who says, "You never spend time with me," invites defensiveness. The difference isn't the problem, it's the delivery. Owning your emotions through language also teaches others that you're emotionally safe to talk to. Because people trust those who communicate without cruelty. You can say something difficult, but if you say it with ownership, it lands differently. It becomes a moment of truth instead of a moment of damage. There's also a powerful ripple effect. When you start using I statements, people around you subconsciously start mirroring that energy. The tone of your interactions changes. Instead of two people fighting to be right, you become two people trying to be real. You shift the focus from accusation to collaboration. But make no mistake, this takes discipline. In moments of frustration, the brain wants to protect, not connect. It wants to throw words like weapons. And in that split second, it feels good. But if you can pause, just pause long enough to translate that into an I, you change the entire outcome. That pause is the space where emotional maturity lives. Learning to speak this way is like retraining your mind. It means catching yourself mid-sentence. It means switching from "you're so lazy" to "I feel stressed when things don't get done." It means choosing curiosity over control. It means remembering that communication isn't about winning, it's about understanding. The goal isn't to avoid expressing your feelings, it's to express them in a way that people can actually hear. Because when people feel attacked, their ears close, but when people feel invited into your experience, their empathy opens. Statements are that invitation. They say, "Here's where I am. Can you meet me here?" There's a quiet strength in that kind of honesty. It doesn't demand, it doesn't accuse, it simply reveals. And that revelation makes people want to listen instead of fight back. Every relationship that thrives, whether romantic, professional, or personal, depends on this kind of communication. It's the difference between pushing someone away and pulling them closer, between being heard and being resisted, between defending your ego and protecting your connection. And it all begins with one small shift, taking ownership of your feelings before expressing them. Because when you take responsibility for your emotions, you stop trying to control others through blame. You start speaking from awareness instead of reaction. And that's the kind of communication that not only earns trust, but keeps it consistent in your reactions. People don't just listen to what you say, they watch how you react. Every sigh, every tone shift, every pause tells them something about whether you're safe to be real with or not. And that's what builds or breaks trust. Because people don't trust unpredictable energy. They might admire your words, they might respect your talent, but if they can't predict your reaction, they'll start hiding the truth from you. When you're consistent in your reactions, you create emotional safety, and emotional safety is the foundation of trust. It means people don't have to guess which version of you they're going to get today, the calm one or the explosive one, the listener or the judge. It means your presence feels steady, not stormy. And when people feel steady energy from you, they start to open up, to share, to be honest. Think about it. When was the last time you wanted to tell someone something important but hesitated? You probably paused not because you didn't know what to say, but because you didn't know how they'd react. That moment right there is what inconsistency does. It teaches people to measure their words, to hide their mistakes, to shrink their truth just to keep the peace. That's not communication, that's survival. Being consistent doesn't mean being emotionless. It means being grounded. It means that even when you're upset, people still feel respected in your presence. It means your reaction doesn't come from impulse, but from intention. Because when people know your emotions are stable, they start trusting your judgment. And that kind of trust changes everything in relationships, in leadership, in life. The truth is, inconsistency usually comes from unregulated emotion. You can't control what triggers you, but you can control how you respond once you're triggered. The moment you feel that rise, that tightness in your chest, that heat in your voice, that's the moment that decides whether you'll build trust or break it. You can't rewind your reaction once it lands. You can only prevent it before it does. Imagine being the kind of person people come to not because you're perfect, but because you're predictable and you're calm. You don't lose control when things get heated. You don't lash out when things go wrong. You don't make people walk on eggshells around your mood. That's power, not loud power, but quiet strength. And it's that consistency that makes your communication trustworthy. Because people don't remember every conversation they have with you, but they remember how safe or unsafe they felt. They remember whether their voice mattered when they disagreed with you. They remember whether you listened or snapped. And over time, that pattern becomes your emotional reputation. Emotional consistency isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about processing them before projecting them. It's pausing before reacting. It's asking yourself, what's the outcome I want from this conversation? Before you speak. Because when you react from emotion, you lose control of the outcome. But when you respond from awareness, you shape the outcome. If someone brings you bad news, how you handle that moment determines whether they'll ever bring it again. If your reaction is anger, they'll avoid you next time. If your reaction is composure, they'll trust you even with the hard stuff. The people who create trust don't just react less, they react smarter. They understand that every reaction is communication in itself. When you're inconsistent, people never know how to approach you. One day they share openly, and you're kind and patient. The next day, you're sharp and dismissive. They start second-guessing every word. And once people have to calculate how to talk to you, they stop being honest with you. Trust doesn't die from betrayal alone. It dies from inconsistency that feels unsafe. Being consistent also means taking ownership of your emotions. It's saying, I'm frustrated right now, so I'm going to take a minute before I respond, instead of pretending you're fine and then exploding later. That kind of self-awareness doesn't make you weak. It makes you stable. It shows people that you can manage your feelings instead of letting your feelings manage you. In leadership, this is everything. Teams don't follow talent, they follow consistency. They want to know that when things fall apart, their leader won't. They want to know that feedback won't turn into humiliation, that mistakes won't turn into punishment. The most trusted leaders aren't the loudest, they're the ones whose reactions stay balanced under pressure. And in relationships, emotional consistency is love in action. It tells your partner, your friends, your family, you don't have to walk on eggshells with me, because unpredictability creates distance. People start censoring themselves, avoiding conflict, avoiding honesty, not because they don't care, but because they don't feel safe. But when your reactions are consistent, you give them space to show up fully. Consistency also builds credibility over time. Anyone can be calm once or twice, but when you're calm every time, when your tone stays steady even in disagreement, people start to believe you're trustworthy, and that belief becomes stronger than any single apology you could ever give after a bad reaction. It's not about never raising your voice, it's about raising it for the right reasons. It's about matching your emotion to the moment, not letting the moment dictate your emotion. Because if your reaction is bigger than the situation, people stop hearing your message and start fearing your response. If you want to become more consistent, start by studying your triggers. Notice what kind of situations make you lose composure. Notice what tone, what phrase, what body language flips that emotional switch in you. Once you see the pattern, you can prepare for it. You can choose to breathe before you break. You can choose to respond differently next time. Because consistency is built through awareness, not control. There's a reason people describe the most trusted communicators as steady, or grounded, or balanced. It's not that they don't feel anger, sadness, or frustration. It's that they've learned how to carry emotion without spilling it on everyone else. They can hold tension without becoming it. That's emotional maturity, and it's what makes their words land with weight instead of chaos. Consistency doesn't mean you always agree. It doesn't mean you always smile. It means your response matches your principles, not your mood. It means people know that no matter how hard the conversation gets, you'll stay respectful. And that predictability is what keeps communication open. Because unpredictability confuses people. One moment of calm doesn't erase 10 moments of volatility. Trust grows through repetition, through the small, consistent reactions that say, I can handle this. Over time, those moments build a pattern, and that pattern becomes safety. Everyone wants to be heard, but not everyone realizes that being heard depends on being safe to talk to. And being safe to talk to depends on how you react. Your reaction is the emotional climate of every conversation you're in. If your reactions are stormy, people hide. If your reactions are steady, people bloom. So every time you feel that urge to react instantly, pause, because that pause is where respect lives. It's the space between impulse and integrity. It's the moment that decides whether people walk closer to you or quietly pull away. Consistency isn't loud, but it's unforgettable. It's the difference between someone trusting your words and someone trusting you. Listen to understand, not to respond. Listening is the most powerful communication habit you can build if you want people to trust you. And yet, it's also the one most people fail at, not because they don't care, but because they listen with the wrong goal. Most people listen to reply. They're not hearing you, they're waiting for their turn to talk. But when you listen to understand, you do something extraordinary. You make the other person feel seen. You make them feel safe. You make them feel like their words actually matter, and that feeling builds trust faster than anything you could ever say. We've all been in those conversations where you're pouring your heart out and you can just tell the other person isn't really there. Their eyes might be on you, but their mind is rehearsing their response. They nod at the right times, maybe even say, "I get it," but you can feel it. They don't. And that's when you emotionally shut down, because deep down, people don't want to win conversations. They want to feel understood in them. When you listen to understand, your focus shifts from proving your point to connecting with theirs. You stop trying to fix, defend, or outtalk. You start to explore, empathize, and learn. It's not about agreeing, it's about being curious enough to know why they feel the way they do. That kind of listening changes everything, because people naturally open up to those who make them feel heard without judgment. Jefferson Fisher often says, "People trust what they feel safe to say." That means your job in communication isn't to have the best argument. It's to create safety through listening. True listening is not passive, it's one of the most active things you can do. It requires your attention, your patience, and your ego to take a step back, because ego listens to reply, empathy listens to understand, and trust grows in the space empathy creates. Think about a time when someone listened to you so deeply that you felt lighter after the conversation. They didn't interrupt. They didn't rush to offer advice. They didn't try to make it about them. They just listened, and you felt calm, even if your problem wasn't solved yet. That's what listening to understand does. It heals tension before words even finish leaving someone's mouth. Listening like that takes discipline. It means you're not just hearing words, you're noticing tone, pauses, emotion. You're reading what's not being said as much as what is. When someone says, "I'm fine," but their voice cracks slightly, listening to understand means you catch that. You sense that maybe they're not fine. And instead of moving on, you ask gently, "You sure you're okay?" That one moment can make someone feel deeply cared for, because you didn't listen at the surface level. You listened with intent. The reason most people don't listen this way is because silence makes them uncomfortable. They think if they're not talking, they're not adding value. But the truth is, silence is often the space where connection forms. Sometimes people just need to talk it out. They don't need your solution, they need your stillness. When you fill every silence with advice, you rob them of the space to process their own thoughts. Listening to understand also means suspending judgment. It's hard because we all carry biases, beliefs, and personal experiences that shape how we hear others. But if you want to build trust, you have to listen beyond your filter. You have to say to yourself, "Let me see this from their perspective, even if I disagree." That doesn't mean you have to accept everything they say. It just means you care enough to see where it's coming from. Imagine having a conversation where instead of saying, "You're wrong," you say, "Help me understand why you see it that way." That one sentence disarms defensiveness instantly. It replaces argument with dialogue. And when people feel like they don't have to fight to be heard, they start to trust you with more honesty. Listening to understand also builds patience, not just for others, but for yourself. Because when you practice this habit, you start to see that most communication problems aren't about words. They're about emotion. When someone raises their voice, it's rarely because of the last thing you said. It's because they don't feel heard. Once they do, the tone drops, the tension dissolves. Listening has the power to calm storms that words can't. In professional life, this skill separates great communicators from good ones. Anyone can speak clearly, few can listen deeply. The best leaders, negotiators, and influencers understand that listening is strategy. They know that people reveal everything you need to know, their fears, needs, and motives. You just give them space to talk. Listening is how you gather insight that others miss. In relationships, listening to understand builds emotional intimacy. It says, "You don't have to fight for my attention. You already have it." And when your partner, your friend, or your family member feels that from you, they stop performing and start being real. That's when conversations stop being exchanges of words and start becoming connections of truth. When you listen just to respond, the conversation becomes a competition. You're waiting for a pause so you can jump in with your next point. But when you listen to understand, it becomes a collaboration. You're both building clarity together instead of building walls of defense. That shift from competition to collaboration transforms communication from exhausting to meaningful. The best listeners also know how to validate without agreeing. Validation isn't saying, "You're right." It's saying, "I can see why you feel that way." It's acknowledging emotion before logic. Because people can't hear logic until they feel emotionally understood. When you skip validation and go straight to reasoning, it feels like dismissal. But when you validate first, it feels like compassion. You can tell when someone's listening to understand, their body language softens, their eyes stay steady, their tone lowers, they're not rushing you. They're giving you time to finish, even if you stumble over your words. They're not listening for mistakes, they're listening for meaning. That kind of presence doesn't just build trust, it restores it, even in relationships that have been damaged. Listening is also about humility. It's the quiet acknowledgement that you don't know everything and that every person you talk to has something to teach you. When you approach conversations with that mindset, you become more than a communicator, you become a connector. People start seeking you out not because you talk well, but because they feel understood when they're with you. There's a subtle but powerful truth here. People remember how you made them feel far longer than what you said. And the feeling of being understood is one of the rarest gifts you can give someone. Because when someone truly listens, you feel human again. You feel like your emotions make sense. You feel like you matter. That's what trust is built on, not big words, but small moments of being heard. Listening to understand takes practice. It means catching yourself when your mind starts preparing a response. It means noticing when your focus drifts and bringing it back. It means slowing down long enough to let the other person's story breathe. Because every time you do, you're not just building understanding, you're building trust. And the real magic, once you learn to listen this way, people start listening to you the same way. Trust always mirrors itself. When you give it, it grows. When you model it, it multiplies. Listening to understand doesn't just change your conversations, it changes the entire way people experience your presence. The trust you build through communication. At the end of the day, trust isn't something you demand, it's something you earn through your daily communication habits. It's not built in grand gestures or big promises. It's built in the quiet consistency of how you speak, how you listen, and how you show up. Every tone, every pause, every reaction, it all teaches people whether you're safe to open up to or not. Building trust through communication isn't about being perfect. It's about being real and intentional. It's about showing people that your words have weight because they come from integrity. It's in the way you control your emotions instead of letting them control you. It's in the way you choose honesty over comfort, patience over impulse, and understanding over winning. Trust grows when your communication becomes a reflection of your character, not your mood. When people know that no matter how hard the moment gets, you'll stay respectful. When they can rely on your tone to be steady, your presence to be calm, and your words to be truthful, that's when they start to feel safe with you. And safety is the soil where trust grows. Remember, communication isn't just talking, it's listening, it's reacting, it's how you make people feel. The goal isn't to sound right, it's to be understood and to make others feel understood too. Because people don't connect through perfect speeches or flawless delivery, they connect through authenticity. If you want to build unshakable trust, start small, keep your promises, listen with intention, speak with respect, react with calm, and above all, be consistent in who you are, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Because real communication isn't proven when everything's peaceful, it's proven when everything's tense. When people know that your words match your actions, your tone matches your values, and your reactions match your heart, they'll trust you. Not just in conversation, but in silence too. Because trust isn't built in the moments you talk, it's built in the moments you listen. And when you master that, when your communication becomes a bridge instead of a barrier, you won't just earn trust, you'll earn respect, influence, and genuine connection that lasts far beyond words.